the Princess Diana of the 18th century. That's how Georgiana Cavendish, the Duchess of Devonshire, is often remembered. And it's not hard to see why. Though 2 centuries lie between them, the echoes of their lives are uncanny. Born into the noble Spencer family, married too young, trapped in loveless marriages shared with other women, worshipped by the public, and gone far too soon. What lies behind these haunting similarities? Coincidence? Fate? Or something deeper? Let's find out in today's video. Welcome back to Female Tales. I'm Yulia, and together on this channel, we explore the stories of remarkable women from history. If history speaks to you, like the video, join our community, and let's head straight into the depths of the past. The Spencers are one of the most distinguished families in Britain, a name that hardly needs any introduction. Their lineage dates all the way back to the 15th century, when they built their fortune on sheep farming and acquired the Althorpe estate, the very place tied to the childhoods of both Georgiana and Diana. And it's to this estate that we now return. Although the time they spent there, and likely the memories they carried from it, were profoundly different. Georgiana, technically pronounced Georgiana, though I hope you'll forgive me if I occasionally use the version that sounds more familiar to our ears, was born at Althorpe in 1757, into what was for the time an unusually warm and affectionate family. After all, emotional connection and talk of personal boundaries weren't exactly the norm in the mid-18th century. But the household of John Spencer and his wife Georgiana Spencer, yes, mother and daughter shared the same name, don't be too surprised, was truly loving. After her daughter's birth, her mother wrote, "I will own I feel so partial to my dear little G that I think I never shall love another so well." Her father, though known in society for being rather reserved in his emotions, once wrote to his daughter, "But indeed, my dearest Georgiana, I did not know until lately how much I loved you. I miss you every day and every hour," which, as you can imagine, was highly unusual, especially coming from a man of that era and toward a daughter. In time, little Georgiana would be joined by a brother and a sister, and the three would be raised with Enlightenment ideals, growing up close, both emotionally and intellectually, maintaining strong ties throughout their lives. Sadly, little Diana Spencer could only dream of growing up in the kind of warmth and affection that surrounded Georgiana. Her father, also named John Spencer, yes, the family wasn't exactly inventive with names, but we'll let that joke pass, and her mother, Frances Roche, were trapped in a deeply unhappy marriage. He physically abused his wife, even in front of their children, and when Diana was still a very young girl, her mother left the family for another man. Diana's brother later described that heartbreaking moment in his memoirs. While she was packing her stuff to leave, she promised Diana, then aged 5, she'd come back to see her. Diana used to wait on the doorstep for her, but she never came. Diana herself would later call her childhood very unhappy. Later in life, Diana would gain a stepmother, a woman she deeply disliked, and once, quite famously, pushed down the stairs of the family home. That home was Althorpe, to which she had moved as a teenager after her father inherited the title of Earl, and she officially became Lady Diana. But childhood, for better or worse, always comes to an end. And one can't help but wonder, what did these girls dream of, walking through those grand gilded halls? Undoubtedly, like so many others, they dreamed of love and of finding their perfect prince. Yet sadly, for both of them, those fairy tales would come undone, quietly and painfully. In yet another mirror of fate, both women would marry young, barely knowing the men they were to spend their lives with. Men older than them, and men with whom happiness would remain out of reach. Georgiana married on her 17th birthday to none other than society's most eligible bachelor, William Cavendish, the 5th Duke of Devonshire, who was 9 years her senior. It was, on paper, a remarkable union. The merging of two of Britain's wealthiest and most aristocratic families, the Spencers and the Cavendishes. And with it, Georgiana would gain not only immense social standing, but the highly coveted title of Duchess. Before the wedding, she had seen him only a handful of times. They first met while vacationing in the spa town in the Netherlands and danced together at a few balls. But that was enough for young Georgiana to cast William in the role of her romantic ideal. In reality, though, it would have been hard to find two less compatible individuals. Georgiana was vibrant, emotional, full of life. In high society, she would later be called a phenomenon. One contemporary described her with admiration. She effaces all without being a beauty, but her youthful figure, flowing good nature, sense and lively modesty, and modest familiarity make her a phenomenon. William, on the other hand, was emotionally distant and cold. Remind you of another famous couple? At the time, Georgiana and her family believed that perhaps William's coldness was simply a public facade, that behind closed doors he might be kind and warm, like Georgiana's own father. But no, he was exactly who he appeared to be. As one brutal description put it, incapable of any strong emotion and destitute of all energy and activity of mind. And so, any dreams of a tender, loving marriage crumbled for Georgiana within the very first years of their union. At just 20 years old, Diana married her charming 33-year-old Prince of Wales. And just like her famous predecessor, she knew very little about the man she was marrying, apart from the polished public image everyone else saw. Diana would later admit that she and Charles had met only 13 times before their engagement, and most of those encounters hadn't even been private. And so, history quietly repeated itself. 2 centuries later, a grown, serious, emotionally reserved man, firmly rooted in his own world and interests, married a young woman who, in every possible way, was not the right match for him. But on July 29th, 1981, no one could have guessed what kind of tragedy would one day overshadow what began as a fairy tale wedding. It's striking, isn't it? In fairy tales, marriage marks the beginning of happily ever after. But for these 2 women, it marked only the beginning of ever after, without the happy. Very quickly, the young Duchess Georgiana and the young Princess Diana became true fashion icons, the most admired and talked about women of their time. While their husbands showed little interest in them, the rest of the world was utterly captivated. People were simply obsessed with the young Duchess of Devonshire. There was Devonshire brown, Devonshire hair powder, and even the Devonshire minuet, a dance Georgiana co-created with Vestris, the leading dancer of the time. Georgiana was considered the ultimate trendsetter at court. Inspired by her friend Marie Antoinette, she helped introduce the fashion for elaborate plumes, which eventually had to be banned, as the competition among women to have the tallest feathered hairstyle became utterly absurd. From the French queen, she also borrowed the trend for extravagant hair towers, which quickly swept through London society. The press, too, was obsessed with her. The boom of printed publications in England meant newspapers quickly realised that images of Georgiana and stories about her sold incredibly well. Her name rarely left the front pages. And as for the media frenzy surrounding Diana, well, that hardly needs explanation. There was even a name for it. Dianamania. She became the most photographed woman in the world, although that very attention would later contribute to the tragedy in a Paris tunnel. Another bond between them, to be idolised by the world and yet profoundly alone. But such immense popularity and constant public scrutiny were in many ways destructive for both women. In Georgiana's case, over time she developed serious problems with excessive drinking, mind-altering substances, and gambling. She accumulated enormous debts, which she hid from her husband for as long as she could. She also suffered several miscarriages in the early years of her marriage, likely linked to the alcohol and the substances whose effects on pregnancy were not yet understood at the time. And Georgiana, it seems, struggled with the same difficulties around eating and self-image that Diana would face centuries later, though I'll phrase this carefully, since YouTube tends to be sensitive around such topics. In Andrew Morton's biography, Diana herself recalled, "Charles put his hand on my waistline and said, 'Oh, a bit chubby here, aren't we?' That moment was likely the trigger for her emotional spiral. Diana described her condition as an escape mechanism that worked for me at that time. She also said, and the Camilla thing, the first time I was measured for my wedding dress, I was 29 inches round the waist. The day I got married, I was 23.5 inches. I had shrunk into nothing from February to July. Diana battled her eating disorder for years. She called it a symptom of what was going on in my marriage, and there was indeed a great deal going on. Tragically, both women found themselves in humiliating marriages, of 3. As Diana famously said in her 1995 interview,
"Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded."
A line that Georgiana, I believe, could have uttered just as well. In 1782, during a trip to Bath, where she went to seek treatment for infertility, after 9 years of childless marriage, Georgiana met Lady Elizabeth Foster. A close friendship formed almost instantly between the two women. Bess's position in society was precarious. She had left her husband, and in that era, a woman without a man had no real standing. Georgiana extended a hand of compassion and invited her to stay at their home. Before long, the Devonshire marriage had become a ménage à trois. And the most unsettling part? Within a year, both Georgiana and Bess gave birth to daughters, both fathered by the Duke, just 13 days apart. And as the years went on, Georgiana's subsequent children continued to arrive suspiciously in step with Bess's. The entire arrangement became the subject of rampant gossip across England. Satirical prints of the trio were wildly popular, and really, how could it not have caused a scandal? Yet, the 3 of them lived together this way for the rest of Georgiana's life. After her death, it was Elizabeth who married William and became the next Duchess of Devonshire. Call me old-fashioned, but I find it hard to see such an arrangement as noble or enlightened. Unlike Georgiana, Princess Diana never had to share a home with her rival, Camilla Parker Bowles. But what's fascinating is that their relationship didn't begin in animosity, quite the opposite. As Penny Junor recounts in her book about Camilla, Diana used to visit Camilla and Andrew Parker Bowles at their country house in the early days of her courtship with Charles, around 1980. The two women reportedly got along quite well. Thanks to Diana's natural warmth with children, she had once worked as a nanny. She even helped Camilla with her own 2 children, Tom and Laura. At the time, Charles insisted Camilla was just a friend, never quite explaining how close that friendship really was. But before the wedding even took place, Diana discovered that Camilla clearly meant far more to her fiancé than he was willing to admit. One day, she came across a bracelet, already prepared as a gift, engraved with the letters G and F. The initials stood for Gladys and Fred, nicknames Charles and Camilla had given each other, inspired by characters from the BBC radio comedy The Goon Show. Here's how Diana later described the moment to her biographer. "I walked into this man's office one day and I said, 'Ooh, what's in that parcel?' And he said, 'Oh, you shouldn't look at that.' So I opened it and there was the bracelet. I was devastated and I said, 'Well, he's going to give it to her tonight.' So, rage. You know, what? Can't you be honest with me?" But no, absolutely cut me dead. It was as if he'd made his decision, and if it wasn't going to work, it wasn't going to work. One can't help but wish the young Diana had found the strength right then and there to walk away, because Camilla would remain a constant presence in Charles's life for decades to come. And so this triangle too became entangled in scandal after scandal, explosive biographies, confessional interviews, and of course, the infamous Tampongate. There was, however, one crucial difference between Diana and Georgiana. In the end, Diana had the chance to break free. She had the option and the courage to choose divorce. But it wouldn't be entirely fair of me to speak only of the husband's affairs. We must also talk about the lovers of our heroines. Trapped in cold and unfulfilling marriages, both Georgiana and Diana sought moments of warmth elsewhere, and found them. One of Diana's most well-known relationships was with Major James Hewitt, a former cavalry officer and riding instructor to the royal family. Over the years, many have falsely speculated that he was Prince Harry's biological father, a persistent myth, despite the fact that their affair began 2 years after Harry was born. As for Georgiana, her love affair led to something even more consequential: the birth of a child. Likely drawn together by shared political interests, Georgiana became involved with Charles Grey, the future Prime Minister, and in 1792 she gave birth to a daughter, Eliza Courtney. Now, while the Duke had no trouble bringing home his illegitimate child by a maid, or fathering more children with Georgiana's closest friend, Georgiana herself had no such freedom. For her, the consequences were much harsher. She was forced to give up her daughter, entrusting her to the Grey family to be raised in secrecy. For a mother as emotionally involved and loving as Georgiana, it was an unthinkable pain. She wrote these lines for Eliza: "Unhappy child of indiscretion, poor slumberer on a breast, forlorn pledge of reproof of past transgression, dear but unfortunate to be born." She gave birth to Eliza while in exile on the continent, sent away in secrecy and shame, and was only allowed to return to England and to her other children several years later, once the scandal had faded. This is yet another parallel that connects these two women: the warmth of their motherhood and the many social conventions they quietly but firmly defied in the name of love for their children. Georgiana, despite the mockery and raised eyebrows of those around her, insisted on breastfeeding her own children, something virtually unheard of among women of her rank. She was far more involved in their everyday lives than was expected, or even deemed appropriate for a duchess of her time. Like her own mother before her, Georgiana drew inspiration from the writings of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who argued that children needed love, attention, and emotional closeness. She once wrote to her eldest daughter, "Every hour I pass away from you, I regret you. If I amuse myself or see anything I admire, I long to share the happiness with you. If, on the contrary, I am out of spirits, I wish for your presence, which alone would do me good." And after Georgiana's death, that same daughter wrote, "O my beloved, my adored departed mother, you whom I loved with such tenderness, you who were the best of mothers." Diana too became something of a revolutionary within the royal family when it came to parenting. She was uncompromising where her sons were concerned. She was the first to take young William on an official royal tour. She personally drove her sons to school as often as her schedule allowed. Even her public duties were planned around their routines. She called Harry a little rascal, just like me, and William, my little wise old man. Another powerful parallel between these two women lies in how much they gave back to society. Georgiana, though a well-known figure in high society, also became active in politics, one of the first women of her time to take part in public political life in a meaningful way. Her activism began in 1778 when she inspired a wave of women to campaign in support of the Whig Party. Georgiana didn't just host salons or attend political dinners. She walked the streets, speaking directly with ordinary citizens to rally support. Despite her privilege, she, like Diana after her, showed genuine kindness and compassion for the common people. Lady Charlotte Berry once wrote of her generosity: "When some individual came to her in pecuniary distress, she would always relieve him or her and leave her own difficulties unprovided for." She was also a passionate writer, producing both prose and poetry, some of which was published in her lifetime. And in true Enlightenment fashion, she even assembled her own mineral collection, a truly multifaceted duchess. As for Diana, no description of her legacy would be complete without mentioning the title the public gave her, the Queen of People's Hearts. And rightly so. Stephen Lee, director of the UK Institute of Charity Fundraising Managers, once said, "Her overall effect on charity is probably more significant than any other person's in the 20th century." And perhaps the most haunting parallel of all is how early both of their lives came to an end. In Diana's case, it was especially sudden and shocking. The car crash in the Paris tunnel during the night of August 30th to 31st, 1997 ended her life at just 36 years old. Georgiana died at the age of 48, which, by the standards of her time, was already a respectable lifespan. But it's worth noting that her mother outlived her, so I would still call her death premature. She had been seriously ill for some time, and had even lost one of her eyes before the end. The likely cause of death was a liver abscess. Thousands of Londoners gathered outside her home to mourn her. Just as 2 centuries later, hundreds of thousands would gather to mourn her famous great-great-great-grandniece, Princess Diana. Born as just another Spencer girl, these 2 women became the ones who made that name known to the entire world. But they paid a high price for it. One thing is certain: they lived extraordinary lives. Lives filled with beauty, struggle, heartbreak, and strength. And they left behind something that refuses to fade. A legacy that still stirs our imagination, even centuries later. What do you think? Were these parallels just coincidence or something more? Leave your thoughts below and see you in the next video.